In the previous video lesson, we looked at a program for collecting stamps and to maintain data coming from a text file that's tab delimited and be able to display that data, be able to add to it, remove from it, and run some various reports. If you have not watched that video, I suggest you go back and watch the previous video to see the program we're going to be building with this code so you understand how things work and what the result will be. So I'm going to jump over to the programming code here. And I started by creating a class called stamp. Now we talked about encapsulation. In a lot of languages you have to specify the different fields that you're going to be using in the class. We don't have to do that in Python, but I wanted a reference, so I just simply put the various fields or attributes, or you can think of class level variables, that would make up our data object. So again, we have our Scott's number, the country that issued the stamp, the description, the year it was issued, the color, the face value as a floating value, that's the postage value of the stamp, whether it was mint or not, the value, and I added a couple things in here that aren't currently here, and that is I want to know the hinge status and the grade. Then we have our initializer, or it might be our constructor, and we're passing it those values. Of course, we always start with self, and then we have Scott, nation, description, year, color, face value, mint, hinged, grade, and value. And I take those parameters and create encapsulated private values with the 2 underscores in front of each. And for the mint, I'm creating a Boolean expression. This is going to be a string, but based on whether that's true or false. So if the length is 5, meaning if the word false, we'll set mint to false. Then I have a function for write tabbed record to file tab. Not sure why I said file tab. Probably file would be the appropriate thing there. Write tab record to file. But this is the routine for exporting our collection back out to that data file. It's a little bit different from what we might print our stamp in the display, such as we saw back here. We're printing the stamps, which gives us the information. That's our dunder method of str that prints those. So this is all that data as a tab delimited format to our data file. You see all the tabs that are added in there through concatenation. At times in my program, I want to get the Scott number, so I have a function for get Scott. Same with get face value. For face value, if it's less than $1, I'm going to display it with the cent symbol, or just a small c. So I'm going to take that value as an integer and divide it by 100 and put that in a formatted string with the cent character. Otherwise, we'll display it with a $sign and we'll format it for 2 decimals. So you see the difference there, 15 cents versus $1.20. I have a routine for getting the full description. And what I do here is I truncate the description to 50 characters. So if we have a very verbose description, in order to fit into a columnized report, I'm going to limit it to 50 characters. And here I'm concatenating the country, and then the face value, the description, and the color. I have a routine for getting the condition, whether it's used or mint. And I'm going to add to that condition the hinged value and the grade. And we'll see how this all plays out when we print out our reports. So if we look at the report, there is the description, truncated to 50 characters, and there is the condition. I have a function to determine if the country is US or not, and we'll use that in separating the United States from the world when we run our report. I want to be able to get the value, get the year, and then here's that dunder method of str, which is what I print. I'm going to do a return string, a formatted string of Scott number in left justified in a column of 6, the year converted to a string, left justified in a column of 4, that full description, which was our country, the face value, the description, and the color. And then we're going to concatenate to that, continuing on, the condition, left justified in a column of 11, and then the current value of the stamp specified as 2 decimals and a placeholder of 8 digits. I want to be able to sort the stamps, so here I have a routine for sorting the stamps on the country and the Scott number. So all the US stamps will appear alphabetically or numerically by the Scott number, and then all the countries, all the world stamps, alphabetically by country, and within that, the Scott number of those countries. So that is our class of stamp. I could have saved that as an external file, as a separate file, and then brought that into my main program. I chose to do it all in one file. So let's take a look now at our main program. So we have our main routine, and I'm creating a blank collection that's going to contain our stamps. See a little typo there. Then I'm going to populate that data. So I call a function called read data, and I pass it the collection list. Currently it starts out as blank. And so what happens there is runs this routine of read data. We're going to do a try except. And so we're going to open up that data file. We're going to read it line by line. We're going to ignore the first line because that's the column headers in our data file. And then we're going to read each line as long as the line is greater than 10. If there's a blank line at the end, we're going to ignore that. I'm going to take that line and separate it or split it by the tabs. And I'll end up with really 10 different items on each line, going from item index 0 to item index 9, and I pass those separated items or those split items to the initializer for my stamps. Now my stamps is the local representation of that collection that was passed, that list. So my stamps is also a list. So we'll build that list through this loop with each line. We'll close the data file when we're done, and then we're going to print that stamp data has been imported and how many records there were in that data file. And if something goes wrong, we'll say something went wrong, the data was not read. That's how we get the data from our text file into our collection of our stamp objects. Once that is done, we're going to show our menu. And here's our menu, and I noticed when I ran this earlier that I didn't add the X for exit, so I'm going to put that in here. As an option. Once we've shown that menu, we're going to specify a variable of choice equals A, and then we're going to do a while loop, and as long as choice does not equal X, this will repeat. So we're using choice as our sentinel value. We're going to get the input from the user as to what letter they want to do in terms of the operations. So if they chose an A, we're going to call add stamp collection. If they chose a D, we're going to choose print all and pass it collection. If they chose N, we're going to call display canceled and pass it the collection. If they choose an R, we'll call remove stamp and again pass it collection. If they choose a Y, we're going to display stamps in year and pass it collection. And then if they choose the question mark, we'll call show menu again. So let's take a look at print all. So this is that D for display. So we pass a collection into my stamps. We're going to sort my stamps. We're going to specify US value equals world value equals total value equals 0.0. So we're setting 3 variables all to 0 and their floating point. We're going to print United States stamps as a header. We're going to print the heading of our columns, left justifying description for 50 characters. And then we're going to do a for loop, and we're going to go through all of the stamps in my stamps, which again is a duplicate of collection. We're going to set the total value to the get values. We're calling the get value function from our stamp class. And if stamp.us bool, remember that was either to return true or false. If it's a US stamp, it'll return true. And if that's the case, we're going to add that value also to our US value variable. And we'll print the stamp. So here I'm printing the stamp. That's going to call that dunder str method to print the stamp info in the nice different columns. Then we're going to print the world stamps. And we're going to go through this again. We're going to print the header. And then we're going to look for all the stamps where that's not United States, where that value is false. And again, we'll increment world value by that get value, and we'll print the stamp. And then we'll show the value of the US collection, the value of the world collection, and the value of the total collection, and formatting those 3 values to 2 decimal places and 11 placeholders. If we go to add a stamp, I have some values here that are true and false. More will contain whether or not we want to add more than one stamp, and added whether we want to add or not add the stamp that we just typed in. So here we got a while loop. As long as more is true, we're going to ask them to enter the information as far as Scott, nation, description, year, color, face value, whether it's mint or not, hinge, grade, worth, and then we're going to create a new stamp object calling our stamp init or stamp constructor, and we'll pass it those different values. One thing to point out here is if nation was left blank, we specified it as U period S period. And if they happen to put in US or United States, we're going to do the same thing. We want those to be consistent in our data as U period S period. Once we've called the init value and created a new stamp, we're going to print a summary, show them what they're adding, print out that new stamp, and ask them, is it okay to add this to the collection? If they made a mistake, they entered something wrong, they may want to say no. If they specified a Y for yes, then we're going to append that new stamp into my stamps, and we'll print that the stamp was added, and we'll set added equal to true. Now the reason I set added equal to true is as we add more and more stamps, maybe we want to add 5, 10, 15, 20 stamps in this session, I'm not going to write that back out to our data file until we're done adding those stamps in. Now the one danger with that is if our computer crashed or something, then we wouldn't get that data added to the data file and it would be lost. Might not be the best approach. You as a designer get to think through those things. It might be better to update our file here each time. And as I think through that, that probably is my preferred choice over the way I did it here. And then we're going to ask if they want to add another stamp, yes or no. And if they say yes, more will continue on as true, otherwise more becomes false. If more becomes false, then this while loop ends, and we're taken to this if added, that's a true value, or maybe it's a false value if they didn't save the stamp. But if added, then we're going to update or call a routine of update data and pass it my stamps. And that's the next little function here. All we're doing here is opening our data file for writing. We're going to write the header out, tab delimited. And then for every record in my stamps, we're going to write out a new line character and call that function of write tabbed record to file tab, which will give us our 10 different columns tab delimited. When we're done with that, written all the stamps, we close the data file. If I want to display the stamps in a particular year, that was letter or menu choice Y. Again, I'm going to sort my stamps. I'm going to ask them to enter the year, say found equals 0, and then I'm going to go through my stamps in a loop for stamp in my stamps. If stamp get year, calling a routine from the stamp class, equals my year, I'm going to increment found by 1. And if found equals 1, so the first stamp it finds, I want to print the header, and then I'll print the stamp. So the second time, it won't print the header, but we'll print the stamp. And then if found equals 0, no stamps were found, then I'm going to say no stamps were found for that year. I want to display just the cancel stamps. Here's my function for that. Again, passing it my stamps, or passing collection into my stamps. I'm going to sort. I'm going to say found equals 0. I'm going to print that this is a report of the used or canceled stamps. I'm going to go through those stamps, and if condition is the first 4 letters, 0 to 4 is my range. That's the index of condition, the substring of the get condition. Remember, the get condition was whether it's used or mint, the hinge factor, and the grade. So I just want to look at used or mint, take that to all lowercase. If it's lowercase used, I'm going to increment found, and again, I'm going to print the header if it's the first one, and print the stamp. If I didn't find anything, if found remains as 0, no stamps were found. No stamps were found to not be in mint condition. I want to remove a stamp. Here we're going to ask them to enter the full Scott number. I'm going to have a value called IDX found equals false. Last record equals the length of my stamps. How many stamps are in my collection? And then for IDX in range last record or last rec. I'm going to look at the index number, so I want to use that index number to get rid of the stamp. So if my stamps element IDX, I'm going to get the Scott number. If it equals the Scott value that was entered by the user, I'm going to say IDX found equals true. I'm going to print found. I'm going to print my header again. I'm going to print the stamp element IDX from my stamps. And then I'm going to confirm. Are you sure you want to remove the stamp? A little typo. I'm going to convert that to upper. If it's an uppercase Y, we're going to delete my stamps element index or IDX. Then we're going to update my stamps and say the stamp was removed. And then we break to get out of this for loop. And if IDX found equals false, we never found that stamp that they specified for the Scott number, we'll tell them Scott number and whatever the Scott number was not found in the collection. And then of course we have our main statement here to run the main function. That's our program. I highly recommend that you go back through this, pause, and create this program yourself to get a feel for what it's like to create a program using a custom class to read data and then maintain that data by adding and removing files and running reports. If you just jumped into this video and haven't seen the prior videos to this, I invite you to check out my Python playlist of videos. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos that I create, you can click my picture up in the top right and subscribe to the channel.